Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I'm talking to Geraint Jones. Geraint served with the Royal Welsh, I nearly said Regiment, and he did. So it served with the Royal Welsh. He's also a best-selling author, appearing on the Times bestseller lists and stuff like that. I've been trying to get him on a podcast for quite a while, and he's now agreed to come on. He's been a very busy guy, and I'm so thankful for you coming on to the podcast. If it wasn't for people agreeing, I don't know what I'll do, type of thing. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, mate. And if you can't get people to agree, there's always blackmail. Where there's a will, there's a way.
So it's the same questions I'm going to ask you that I ask everybody. So it's, where did you grow up? Just to get a bit of a background about you. What made you join the military? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? So if you just want to start off with, where you grew up, what it was like there, what, enticed you to join the action?
I'm from Wrexham, mate, which people might have been familiar with the football now before anyone gives me shit. I was going to watch the games when I was a kid, so I'm allowed to enjoy it now. But I grew up just outside the town. Didn't have any immediate family in the military or anything, but my great-granddad, not my great-granddad, my granddad was Bomber Command, Lancaster Navigator in the Second World War. Then after that, he went into the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. My great-uncle, he joined in 1939. He was in the Battle of France. They landed D+1. And he was with like an amphibious unit. So once they'd done the D-Day landings, they got shipped around the world for the Burma campaign, did the Rangoon landings and stuff in 1945. Then he stayed in the army. He did the Malayan emergency, and I think he left in like the late 60s, put in something like 30. Yeah, well, he joined as a sapper and left as a colonel. So, he put his time in. And when I was young, I had the Top Gun phase. I wanted to be a fast jet pilot. I always loved aircraft, probably because of my granddad. And I was really into like Cold War era aircraft as well. I was really into those growing up. And so I joined Air Cadets, and then I started to really enjoy doing the kind of like the night exercises and the shooting and stuff, and also realised that I was not really pilot material. I was probably more infantry material. So this would have been now kind of getting towards the late 90s. So, there's no idea that Iraq and Afghanistan and, this 20 years of deployments, whatever it was on the horizon. So I thought that I'd probably have the same kind of experience that a lot of people have in the 90s, which was join up, a lot of garrison, Northern Ireland, maybe Balkans, that kind of thing. And that was kind of what I was expecting. So I wanted to go like into the officer kind of pipeline. Now, I spoke to my great uncle about it, and he said, "Have you spoken to the regimental secretary?" So that was a regimental secretary. So, well, if you want to be an officer, you need to get you sponsored by the regiment and stuff like that. This was all news to me. So this would be when I was 16 now. So I went to meet the regimental secretary. The old depot for the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, as it was then, is in Wrexham. So it was nice and handy. Went in there, met a lovely gentleman who was the regimental secretary. And he said, look, you could go, when you go to university, you could join the Officer Training Corps, or we've got a TA company here, which is infantry. Why don't you go there, get a radio on your back, and you can follow the platoon commander around, and you can learn about what it is to be a platoon commander rather than just being on the piss with the OTC. So he kind of marched me over to TA unit, and a couple of weeks later, when I turned 17, I joined the what was at the time 3rd Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers, which was a TA battalion. And I did that while I was at sixth form. I did it when I was at university. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I spent more time on the barracks exercises, overseas exercises and stuff than I did at university, to be honest. I don't know if you have like younger listeners listening, but if you're a younger listener, make sure you really look through what the course syllabus is before you sign up for uni, because just because it says history doesn't mean it's the parts of history that you're interested in, which is what I found out. I thought I would be, I work in history now for a job. I'm fascinated by it. But, I get to my lectures and they'd be talking about what the price of wool was in medieval England. I'm thinking, this isn't really my jam. Let me see if there's an exercise that I can get onto. I was really lucky. It was in the days where there was, I know now they're a lot more limited on training days, but it was basically you could do as much as you wanted. So it was a job for me. It was a great education. Got to go on, like I said, a lot of overseas exercises. Had some fun experiences in places like Uzbekistan and those kind of things, which will one day go into a memoir after the statute of limitations is kind of limited. But no, I had a lot of fun with it, and I was sold. I was like, the infantry's for me. I love it. But what kind of changed a lot of things for me, as it did for a lot of us, was the Iraq War in particular. So that happened, I think it was in my second year, and so about, I was just over halfway through uni. And when Afghanistan had happened, and the Marines were going, and paras are going, and special forces are going, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is just one of those things where those kind of units, they go on this kind of thing all the time. I'm not really missing out on anything here. But when my friends started to get called up and started to go to Iraq, I felt, I got that FOMO, as it's called now. I was like, well, hang on, I want to be going out on this too. And especially when some of the lads went on Telic 4 and they started getting amongst it up in Alamara and stuff, I was like, oh, I'm really fucking missing out here. Now, I'm sure this is something that probably soldiers have had throughout history, is that you always think, if I don't go now, I'm going to miss out. Now, obviously, we were in Afghanistan for another 17 years. Well, longer. But I really wanted to leave. But then at the same time, I'm a wimp and I didn't want to disappoint my parents by dropping out of uni. So I finished off uni, did another year there. Then I stuck my name down to get mobilised. And this was when I had my first kind of lesson that you are a very, very, very small cog in the army, and an unimportant one. And I was thinking, I'll stick my name in, I'll be out in a couple of weeks. And it was about 18 months before I got my call of papers. But yeah, so that essentially was the route from wanting to join as a kid. I should say as well that for as long as I can remember, I've always been fascinated by war stories. I've always wanted to hear them off people. I've always read memoirs. And I've always read big picture books as well, like those big Anthony Beaver Stalingrad books, like Size of the House, and incredibly well researched and things. I used to read those, but what always fascinated me was soldier stories about like a bloke who'd been an infantry soldier in one of the local regiments or in the Second World War, or like the recollections of Rifleman Harris in the Napoleonic War. That stuff had always fascinated me. So I'd always wanted to learn about soldiers. I'd always wanted to be around soldiers, and always wanted to be a soldier. So it was a very natural route for me to go in.
So you got attached to the Royal Welsh then?
No. So the first company I went out with, I'm not going to lie, I was very disappointed. So I put my call to papers in, and a lot of my mates what they'd done is they had backfilled a regular battalion and then gone into a platoon in a regular battalion. And by the time that I went in 2006, things were really kicking off in Basra. And it was quite obvious to me that if you really wanted to get amongst it, an armoured infantry battalion was the place to be. So that's where I wanted to go. And also, I still at this time wanted to go into the regular army, because my idea was, well, if I do a tour, well, at the time when I put my papers in, I was still a private soldier. It was a few years later. I thought if I do a tour as a private soldier, that will make me a much better officer because I'm going to know what the blokes, what are the kind of things that I wanted to know from my boss when I was there, and that kind of thing. What could I do differently, or what could I emulate? So that was the idea, and as we'll kind of come to, that idea never happened in the end. But the first mobilization I got was to a composite company. It was all TA. It was mostly from Seven Scots, hence the jock shield behind me. And I'm not going to lie, I was disappointed because it was a force protection job, which means a lot of stagging on. Now, I've never met a soldier who enjoyed stagging on. The idea of doing a lot of that would be really disappointing. Now, as it turned out, I was wrong to be disappointed for a couple of reasons. One, it was an incredibly good learning curve. Two, I was around some really great people, friends to this day, 20 years ago now. That was fantastic. And there was also, within that force protection job, there was some really interesting jobs that we got to do. So, for instance, when I first got out there, I was part of a 4-man team who was like the intimate force protection for ATO, the guys who blow up bombs, which obviously there's a lot of in Iraq. And that was a great job because you don't stag on, but you're also, you're basically sitting around waiting to go on a job. But if you're not on a job, you're just free to chill out. We were usually on, even if you were stood down, it was a pretty reasonably quick notice to move. And then sometimes if there was an op going on, we'd be on immediate notice to move. And the job was you lead the ATO convoy out, join up with whatever call sign is on the ground, which has found the IED. Then you set up the incident control point, and then you are inside that cordon, then close by to the ATO to try and watch their backs. And obviously, like, being around those people was fantastic because, as we all know, these are absolute legends in the forces. Extremely humble people, very cool. Like, it was, I think I might be making this up. I'm pretty sure these ATOs who were all officers and stuff were like first name basis, just very, very cool. Rockstar people, very cool. Treated us extremely well. So that was the first job I had out on there. Now, I don't mean this to sound derogatory, but I think, like, in a regular battalion, obviously, guys, by the nature of being in a regular battalion, have spent a lot of time there. So you're sending people on career courses to junior Brecken, etc., who can do the job. So you send them to go and learn the job for the next one. In the TA battalion, that hasn't shaken out quite so well. So when we actually got out on the ground, there was a bit of reshuffling because they were realizing that some people who were maybe full screws weren't quite capable of being section commanders. And I'm not blaming anyone for that because it's just like, they haven't.
It's just the nature of the beast,
right? Because you haven't had. It's not like a regular battalion where you've gone out as a private, then a lance corporal. It hasn't worked out like that. Their first operational experience as a section commander, so there had to be a bit of jigging around. So I got moved with some other people to a different platoon because there was somebody. Basically, I got moved to take over a team in another platoon because when I went out there, I just picked up Lance Jack, so I was a team medic on this force protection team. So I got moved over to a platoon to take over a team. And I still got to do some great jobs because we'd go out. Sometimes we did a rotation, so we'd go out with the weapons intelligence section, go out on jobs with them. We did some jobs escorting American officers to different camps where basically America had built these camps for the Iraqis and they'd have to go and inspect them. The only real memory I have of that is that everything got used as a toilet, but it was an interesting job. You got to see different things. And then we did patrols as well. Like, you had Basra City, which by that point was an absolute shit show. The guys who were there, they were getting attacked every day in their bases, mortars, RPGs, small arms. And then to go around the city, they were using warriors, challengers were leading the way. So we didn't go into the city much at all. We would patrol these rural areas. But as a result of that, you got to interact with the locals a lot more. Like on my second tour, I don't think I interacted with locals at all. So in the end, I look back on it and go, what a great experience to have had, because it rounded out the experience that I had in Iraq. And I also think I would have been a lot more out of, not to say I was in my depth on the second tour, but I think I would have been a lot more out of it without that first one as well.
I mean, you mentioned there that, it was the company, or the was all TA. Am I right in thinking that was the first time that had been done in history?
You are correct in thinking that. I think it was Iraq. I think it was the Telek 4 guys who were the first ones. And then from there, because they'd done such a good job, the army was like, well, let's keep this going. And that's the thing, like within that company, I think the company did itself proud. There was good leadership, there some really good soldiers, and the company did everything that was asked of it. Now, but for me, like, that wasn't what I joined the army to do. Like, I wanted to be in like an armored infantry battalion, but it was a great experience with some really great blokes. And there was platoon commanders in there and NCOs, soldiers who would hold their own in any regular battalion, I think. But it was also more noticeable, I think, as well, that I think you could kind of see as well, there was that bit of a blend between people who'd say joined since the wars on terror had begun and the people who joined maybe early 90s. So maybe even like some of them might have even been in the late 80s. And I think that you could see a bit of a difference between those generations. Not to say that it was like an antagonistic relationship, but there were, and maybe it's just the difference between being an older bloke and a younger bloke, because like there was like a proportion in that company who were like, we want to get amongst it, and there was a proportion who were quite happy to go the whole tour without a shot being fired. So it was an interesting experience, and a very good one, to be fair.
What was it like coming back from that? I mean, as a regular battalion or a regular regiment, we'd come back. I mean, out of all the tours I've done, I've never had like the trip to Cyprus to chill out for a few days. None of that. Nothing like that I ever had. But I've been away where we've had TA attached to us, and obviously they stick with the regiment for a month or so afterwards until they disappear. They get their pottle, they post-operational leave. What was it like for you? Was there a transition back to civilian life easy, or did it?
Well, I have a bit of a different story, but from what I understand of the company, they got decompression in Cyprus. Then I think they basically had a few days together, and then they went on leave. And I think that was about it. That's what I think. I could be wrong. But for me personally, I got towards the end of that tour and I thought, I haven't scratched the itch that I want to scratch here. I want to stay. So I said, can I do a back-to-back tour? And they must have been desperate for blokes at the time in the army, because they said yes. I got my papers for 2 Royal Welsh to do. Basically, 2 Royal Welsh were taking over there was only going to be one full warrior battalion, and then there was companies from other regiments, like the King's Royal Hussars provided the company. That there was a few tanky regiments that backfilled warriors as well. It was a bit of a hodgepodge, to be honest. Telek 10, you had, you might have been 12 different regiments there, but you didn't have 12 battalions, if you know what I mean. It was like 2 full battalions, 2 Royal Welsh and 4 rifles, and then you had a company here and there from different regiments. Yeah, it's quite funny, actually, the story of, so I put in for this back-to-back tour, expecting that I would just stay there, and the Royal Welsh had started arriving already, and I thought I'll just pick my stuff out of my tent and move into a new tent. But again, the army being the army said, oh no, you can't do that. You've got to go home first before you come back out. And I thought, well, okay, like a week, hour and a half sounds good, or, 2 weeks. But they said, no, you've got to take 4 weeks. I think it was like 4 weeks leave or something. And then you've got to go and do OPTAG again. And I'm like, oh, I've already, why do I have to do OPTAG? I'm in Iraq, But they said, you've got to do OPTAG again. And it wasn't even like a full OPTAG, because obviously the Royal Welsh had finished theirs. It was like that. I think it was like 2 or 3 days down in Leadenhide or something. So I come home on leave. which I wasn't happy about because I was quite happy out, and I was happy in Iraq. And also, this is now, I think, April, May, something like that. So it's getting hot out there. So I'm acclimatized to the heat. I'm also acclimatized to being on the ground. You know, I've developed that spidey sense that you get when you're on tour. You know, so I'm tuned in. I don't really want to leave. And then I know I'm coming back out, so you can't really relax. Like I'm personally, I'm not a big believer in R&R. Like I think if soldiers want to take it, they should be able to. I've never wanted it. I've always thought that it's. I've always felt R&R was more detrimental to me than helpful, particularly in Afghanistan. But you know, before we get to that, so the army sent me back. So I do my leave, then I turn up for this op tag, and they've put me in for the fucking Afghanistan one. So I'm like, I can't believe I'm here. So you know, the things that you're doing for op tag are different for Afghan than they are for Iraq. You know, you've got different rules of engagement, different threats. So the instructor's like, so I'm in my desert, so I've got a suntan, and the instructors are like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I'm here because I'm going out to Iraq. And they're like, well, this is the Afghan thing. I'm like, yeah, I know, but they sent me on it. And they were like, well, when you were in Iraq? I was like, oh, a couple of weeks ago. And they're like, so you're more current on what it's like out there than we are. So they said, go back to your fucking bed space. So I spent a few days sitting in my bed space, got the tick in the box, and went back out to Iraq. And the problem was then, when I joined the battalion then, and the lads by this point, the battalion has already, like the company I joined had already lost a lad. The battalion had lost 4 people. The battle group had lost more than that. And you're joining lads who have now molded, you know, because they've already molded in camp and through training and through knowing each other for years. But now they've just been going through a month's worth of operations together, which I've now missed. And I'm turning up as a TA Lance Corporal in this thing. And the CQMS, when I got there, because all the flights were coming in at night because of the rocket threat. And then the CQMS, so he was probably pissed off that he had to get up and, you know, tell me where I'm staying and all that and put me in my platoon. It's quite funny. So I get there, he tells me which platoon to go to, which tent to go to. And, you know, he basically said, right, be quiet because the lads have just come off and up a couple of hours earlier. They're trying to get their heads down. I said, all right, no problem. So I go in the tent without any lights. I, you know, creeping around, find an empty one because it was all it was all like breeze blocks around. And then we hadn't put the overhead covering yet, but it's breeze blocks everywhere. So I find an empty kind of like coffin, put my kit into it, get out, get my DOS bag out, quietly as I can, just lying back down onto this mattress, and the fucking IDF alarm goes off and a bunch of rockets come in. Wakes everyone up. And then I hear this voice in the darkness. I'm like, Grimesy, is that you? And he's like, the fuck's that? It's like, guess. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing here? I'm like, joining the platoon, mate. So I knew this lad from TA. So it worked out really nicely that I had a mate in the same tent to begin with. Now, the lads had to lie in, and I'd been told to go back, you know, at silly o'clock in the morning to go and see the CQMS. Anyway, I get there, and he's got this evil grin on his face. And I realised over time he wasn't a nice bloke, this person, but he's got this evil grin, and he goes, go and wake the lads up and tell them they're on area cleaning. I thought, you twat. I'm just, the first time my first day here, and you're going to send the fucking stab corporal in to wake up the company on their lie-in and tell them to go and pick up fucking fag butts. He knew exactly what he was doing. And soon off, I woke the lads up, and they were not happy. Who the fuck are you? Kind of thing. Well, but I think what worked in my favour is that the word got around that I was doing back-to-back tours. And I think the lads assumed, and I never put them right on this for reasons that become apparent, they thought, well, if he's just been out here with the Lancs, and we've been in contact for a month, he must be fucking nuts to come back. So I'm going to leave him alone, that kind of thing. So I never, I mean, I'm not to say I didn't ever get any shit or things. But
I was going to ask that, you know, with you being TA and then going into a regular unit, did you get any pushback off people?
Only
there is always, you know, there is that I wouldn't say animosity, but there's that rivalry, the piss taking, and banter.
Well, by this point, this is the third tour that this battalion has done in 3 or so years, right? And through each of those tours, they've had TA lads from the Royal Welsh TA with them. And I know some of the lads who went on those earlier tours, and they're good fucking blokes. And I think they'd probably come to realise by this point that it's the same as any battalion. You get blokes who are all right at their job and blokes who are shit at their job. And I think as long as you can prove that you weren't a liability, then, fine. But it was quite funny because they'd assumed that I'd been with this warrior battalion before them. So they go, well, he knows what he's doing. Stick him in the lead vehicle, dismount commander. I didn't even know how to open the fucking door on the Warriors. But I thought, I'm not going to tell him that. So, yeah, and then that was a case of it was a case of just getting amongst it and doing your job and not being a liability, really. And it was fun. It was still that era where there was still, I'm not going to say like punch-ups to settle things because it was rarely punch-ups, but it was still quite high testosterone, a lot of pushing, shoving, and you had to convince people in a different way than how you convince people to do jobs now. And I think if you're willing to stick up for yourself and not be pushed around, then that was it. Yeah, I think it's like a lot of these companies. If you have the right people on your side, the rest of the people usually fall in line, don't they? In these kind of loaded flat-wise environments.
Funny you mention that about let's put it this way. On one of my CRs, I was called robust NCO. So I'm from that era.
Yeah.
I am from that era, and I was recently at they had a veterans night at my old regiment, and we were talking to some of the BSMs and some of the Sergeant Majors, and they were saying about what it's like now. And it's very, very. I couldn't even get my head around it. They're literally not allowed to raise the voice of people to, and I just like, whoa, I don't know how that works. It's a different. It's a societal thing as well.
Yeah,
society is very different now to where it was when I joined. I joined in 1985, but it's that whole discipline. Sometimes discipline comes from fear, if that's the right way to put it, and that's the way I think it should be as well. If people go on for the reputation, and you kind of just you're a bit wary of them, but you'll do as they say because they're not going to give you the backhander, but they've done it, been there, they've earned their time, they've earned their stripes, and they've been through the mill as well. I don't think you can be, or I think you can be too soft on people. But like I said, it's different people joining the military now than it was when I joined.
Yeah. I think it was. I think as well there was, and I found this different later in Afghanistan, but in Iraq there was lads who had joined the army because in the early 2000s their mate had come home on leave and gone, mate, you want to get in the army? We do fuck all most days and it's decent wage. And they'd gone, all right. And now these lads are finding themselves on the fucking third tour of Iraq, in a fucking few years. And they've just had enough because they'd never joined to do that. Whereas when we went to Afghanistan, you never really had these issues because everyone had joined knowing what was going to happen. So I found that was a very different environment. I remember there was one op, because we also had to provide, as well as going out on the operations in the city, we had to provide guards for you had to chip in a bloke or two for different guards around the camp. And I can remember being fucking gutted that my name was up for a guard when we had an op to go into the middle of the city, and I figured I'm going to miss a scrap. And I said to the lad who was on it, I was like, mate, is any chance you could fucking swap stags with me? Bit my fucking hand off. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. I'm thinking, God, you joined the infantry and you don't want to be on this op. I couldn't wrap my head around that. Now, he was probably the sensible one, in all fairness. But I found that quite interesting that there was people there who had joined the infantry but weren't particularly keen on going out. There was lads who if we never left camp for the next 3 months, they'd be very happy. Whereas I think there's other proportion of the battalion who you want to be getting out every night. Now, that obviously that can change. You can say you want to go out and then you get out and you think, fucking hell, this is shit. Oh, this is shit. Why did I do this for? This is stupid. But the keenness. I guess what I'm trying to say is I always assumed that the keenness level would be really high throughout the battalion, and as most things in life turn out to be, there's a spectrum.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. Again, I mean, you mentioned earlier that this was probably for some people their third tour, and that's a lot to ask of people. But funny you mentioned there about you people joining up at that time period, knowing they were going to deploy. We'd sit back as old sweats and stuff like that, saying, that's fucking. It was harder in my day, this, that, and the other, and you see this rogue's coming in, you're like, and it's the same as any guy joining a new organisation. You're like, fucking hell, come on, catch up, type of thing. And it's just that they haven't got the experience, that's all. But I was talking to one of my old battery commanders on you a few months back, and he was CO at Purbright around that period. And he was saying, you've got to remember, these lads and lasses were joining up knowing that probably within 18 months, if not sooner, of them joining up, they would either be in Iraq or Afghanistan. And they were still volunteering, people are still volunteering to join the army. As much as that's a fucking pain in the ass nowadays, how long it takes people to get in. It's ridiculous. The more and more I hear about that. But you've got to take your hats off to that period of time, 2000s up until, say, 2012, 13, and people who were joining then knew what was going to be happening, and I think it's these people now who, if they haven't already got out the military, that left, or that they're still thinking of leaving because it's just back to as it was in my day, when like you say, pre-Iraq, where it was just Balkans, if you were lucky, island tours and exercises. That type of thing. I mean, for my really early career, the highlight of the training year was going to Canada. When we got told we were going to Ireland, we were over the moon because we didn't normally do it. But I think the people who were joining up now are very different to what even back from the Afghan Iraq period. There's a definite difference, and maybe it's the different war fighting that we're going to be looking at in the future and stuff like that. But we're still going to have to throw back to that because if we end up going, a bit west to meet Vlad, it's going to be a bit different to what's going on at the moment. We're going to be back with boots on the ground. It's going to be a bloodbath type.
Yeah, I should say as well, because something I should have mentioned earlier was that when I was, say, looking at the army, and I think, maybe I get to Ireland or Balkans, the impression that we kind of had, as a teenager at that time, was that those would be incredibly dull kind of tours. Which now that I've met a lot more veterans and I interview people and people talk more, I realise, I heard that the stuff about, say, the Royal Welsh. This is probably the best example because I was in the Royal Welsh and I had no idea how much shit had been going on at Garage there. And I think maybe that was the thing as well. And it was that because it wasn't talked about as much, and there certainly wasn't fucking helmet cameras and YouTube and everything like that. You just, unless you happen to have known someone who there was maybe like a family friend or, your next door neighbor, you just said, because it'd be like, what happened in Bosnia? Oh, nothing happened in Bosnia. Well, nothing happened in Bosnia. Do you know what I mean? And now I find out, I'm like, fucking hell, loads of stuff happened in Bosnia. But at that time, we just didn't know about it.
Well, the Welsh lads. Funny enough, you mentioned that. You remember the guys who got took hostage, right? They got sent back to the UK in 2 weeks. They were back in theatre, but they didn't go back to the battalion. They came to us because we were doing ambulance commanders. So they came to us to basically drive our Saxons and stuff like that we had. And they were a fucking really good bunch of lads. We really got on with them. I forgot all about that until you just said it. I was like, fucking hell, yeah.
I mean, I'd heard about the hostages, but the kind of story that we'd kind of been told was that, you know, the Serbs would come in, so they had to lay down their arms and get taken hostage. Whereas the reality was they kept going until the fucking ammunition ran out. Like, you know, it's like, whoa. And I only found this out last year.
Some of the stories I've heard of Garage where, you know, the snipers were taking pot shots. The UN soldiers, being the Welsh and then some of the Czechs and the Danes and stuff like that, would position their vehicles so that they would be in line of sight, and hopefully a vehicle get hit, or unfortunately, if one of the lads got it, because then you have the ability to return fire. Because the sniper positions were and stuff like that, and the rules of engagement were shit. To me, the UN's pretty ineffective. Unfortunately, most of that tour I did was UN, and then we changed to it was brought before, so it was like a multinational brigade type of thing. Basically, we took all blueberries off and put all the normal berries on, and then kick fuck out the Serbs for a couple of days. Pack it in, or we're going to smack you. And the Serbs are like, fuck off. And we went, right, okay, then smacked them. They went, right, fair enough, I'll give it. But it was, that was like 95. It was quite an interesting tour. And then later on went back to do another tour in 97, which was like one of them ones where you're just like, what the fuck are we doing here? We were just basically stuck in camp in case we were needed. As artillery, it's pretty fucking boring, like, But later on, it's the only tour that's ever affected me, really. And sometimes it's not what you see; it's what you know has happened, and you see the aftermath of it. That's how it affects some people. It did me anyway. So, I mean, what was this? The tour that you were on, the second tour on, was that a lot more kinetic? Did you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tour of two halves, really. I missed, obviously, like I said, the first few weeks where like a lot of kind of punchy stuff was going on. And then I came out and it's all a bit of a blur. I mean, the thing is, like, with being in the back of a warrior in Basra at that time, was a lot of the time in the back, and this was the same in Afghan, you're not actually conscious of what's going on because you're passed out from the heat. It got to 70 Celsius in the back of those vehicles. And like the door would close and you pass out, and then the door would open, you feel a slight breeze, and basically they'd be like, right, there's something looks dodgy on the side of the road, get out, kick it, get back in, and that was a lot of my tour. I didn't ever find my weapon in Iraq, which was at the time a bit of a source of frustration, but with the rules of engagement being what they were, I never saw anything that I never saw someone. I mean, I saw rounds coming towards us, tracer and things, but I never saw someone who went, oh, there's a guy with a weapon pointing at me. Now, some people weren't maybe quite so, quite so worried about that rules of engagement. I mean, it was a very weird one. Like one of my mates, he says it best. He said it was a gunner's war, and it was. Those lads up in the turret, they'd be getting the 30 mil down. My tour was mostly jump out the back, go forwards, give something a kick, get back in. There was I remember one moment where I kind of realized this tour is different to my first tour was we were doing a strike op, and we were doing the kind of like I think that like the inner cordon on it. So we had to get out of the back and get up on a rooftop. Now, in my first tour, I'd seen a lot of times the tribes would just do this celebratory fire, and they just, they were just blasting tracer in the air. And it had happened quite close to us on a few patrols, but it was just them probably celebrating. I was going to say something that would probably get me in trouble, so I won't say that. But, got to be careful these days. Yeah, but you knew it was celebratory fire. Anyway, so we got up on this rooftop, and fucking tracer starts coming over the top of our heads. And I said to the lads, oh, don't worry about it. It's just celebratory fire. Fucking won. So I'm looking for the firing point, because obviously I don't want to get fucking dragged through the courts by fucking Phil Schreiner or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
So,
Phil Schreiner.
Yeah. And next thing, this fucking Apache turns up and just smokes it. Because the Americans, they were providing the Apaches, and they were not on the same rules of engagement that we were. So that fucking whole tree line where the fire was coming from just disappeared. and then went on fire. And I was like, fucking hell, all right, this isn't quite the same as shaking hands with, villagers. This is a bit different, this is. And, it's quite funny because, there was operations that we did. So a lot of what we were doing was resupplying these operations to resupply the blokes at Basra Palace. So Basra Palace was just under siege. Like, the lads who were there, and lasses, were under siege. Mortars continuously, snipes. And, they were living a very Spartan existence down there. And a lot of the effort was to resupply the place. You basically, from the airport outside the town, you had to punch a corridor down. So you'd have to clear a route, line it with armour all the way along. They would do the same for Basra Palace. You meet in the middle, and then the poor old loggies have got to do the fucking run down to supply it, grab the empties, come out. And those ops could be like, they could go all night or all day, because one of them had done in the day. Now, I was reading a book of somebody, like I can remember bits of one of the days where we did it in the day. And I can remember, because we got the mortar hatches open for a little bit of air. I can remember an RPG going over the top of the mortar hatch. I can remember firing going off. And I've got the headset on in the back, so you're hearing contact reports. But I'm not doing anything. I'm just sat in the back of the fucking Warrior, occasionally passing out and occasionally getting out and kicking something. So it was funny, because I was reading this lad's book who'd been on the same thing, and he was in the turret, so he's got a completely different view of the whole thing. And he's talking about this 12-hour gunfight where there's fucking militia appearing everywhere and fucking bodies dropping off rooftops and stuff. I fucking saw none of that. I just sitting in the back like this. Fucking, so it was, again, it was one of those ones where it was like, I was there, but I didn't fucking do anything.
I know what Basra Palace was like. So in 2006, that's when my last tour was.
Right.
I only half toured because I was getting posted, so thank God. But we fucking, again, just remind us, we used to play Red Alert, on our laptop and that. And I was sat out there, so I went off to eBay, and I bought a little switch, got it delivered to fucking Iraq off eBay. And then there's about 8 of us, all on laptops, and I'd put Red Alert and all of them. And we used to sit in the smoking area on the night and play against each other like in a network game. We'd be getting fucking Chinese mortars coming over. We're all sat there with helmets playing fucking Red Alert. You just like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, it's
surreal.
When we used to visit that place, I mean, you could see that those blokes had had a harder tour. They were leaner. They looked tired. Whereas, like, where we were at the Cobb, it was, obviously, it's very dangerous when you're on the ground. And then, there was a risk of rockets and stuff, but not to the same degree. But then you could go and get a fucking milkshake, and you could go to the gym, and you'd walk. It just wasn't the same, and you could see the toll that it had taken on people physically and mentally by being there.
Especially the guys who were at the P-Jock and places like that.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I thought we were having it easy until them guys would come back on changeover, and you just like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
They were thrashed.
And people don't know about those places, like you said, like the P-Jock, Old State Building. Everybody knows about like the platoon houses in Helmand province and how they were pretty much under siege. Well, so were these places in Basra. Those lads got hammered. And I wish I wish more people would know about it. And I believe in being a part of the solution. So I am working on oral history at the moment, interviewing blokes who were there, because I feel like their story never got told in the British media, British press, and it should be. People should know about what they did.
You say it that way, you're probably looking at because Afghan outshone it. You know what I mean? Type of thing. People have lost it. Society is a fickle thing. People lose interest like that. It's gone. Like you said, Bosnia. That fucking riles me that people have just forgot about it. I'll speak to the kids at work. I said kids at work, 23, 25 year old, and I tell them about stuff in Bosnia. The first time I mentioned Bosnia, they didn't know what I was on about. You know, they didn't understand what was going on in the Troubles of Northern Ireland, which is a good thing, believe me, I think. But I think with stuff like Bosnia should be, you know, it was a fucking genocide in Europe. You know, it's not too dissimilar to what's fucking going on now, I suppose. But it was a civil war. You know, it was very complicated. But it was just, people have just forgot about it, you know. And now, because Afghan and Iraq's finished, you know, the general public are back to fucking ignoring the armed forces type of thing. You know, it's a normal occurrence. It happens all the time. But you're right, with people like yourself who write about history and stuff like that, notice to people, let them know what actually happened, because people just forget. You know, and it annoys me that Bosnia gets forget so rapidly, so easily.
Well, I think the other thing about Iraq was that, like, unlike Afghanistan, it never really had public support in the first place, did it? And so when our troops were going around in berets and having cups of tea, they were quite happy to put it on the news to go, well, look, see, you were wrong about this. It was all right. They're happy to see us. Now, that doesn't fucking... How do you then explain, right, I know we were having cups of tea and wearing our berets 2 years ago. Now we're sending Challenger main battle tanks into the city and we're losing a bloke a week. You know, so I think it was two things. And then on the other hand, you had Afghanistan, which was a much more palatable story. So it's like, look, forget about Iraq. You don't need to know about that. Here, look at our lads in Afghanistan. And it used to fucking piss us off, to be honest, because it's like, don't get me wrong, like, I think those lads in Afghanistan they deserved every bit of recognition they got and more. But it came out in awards and things as well, you know, because when it came out, like the awards that were given for those telex, where it was, you know, like lads at OSB, PJOC, Basra Palace, you know, you're getting 1 or 2 MCs a battalion. Whereas in the companies that were in Afghanistan at the time, it's several MCs, bunch of MIDs, every one of them deserved. But you can't tell me out of the 4 Rifles battle group in Basra Palace that there's only a couple of MCs that were deserved, you know. And I think there was a few things like that. And I mean, I've seen it happen in Afghanistan with companies as well. Like, I was very lucky to work on a book about Easy Company from the 3 Para and Royal Irish, who were up in Musakala. And they were surrounded. They were put in a position that they should never have been put in. Fought tough and nail. And the not a single person in that company received an award, and I know they were put in for them. And I think, you know, there can be this almost political game that's played with both awards and attention in the media, which is, it's quite obvious that some things are pushed forward. So if it's a hostage rescue or something like that, it's a very black and white, this was a good thing. And again, it's everyone that gets those awards deserve those awards. But then I think it's a case of when something is maybe not as politically acceptable or publicly palatable, well, let's just hope that nobody remembers that, and we'll kind of move on. But of course, not everyone can move on, because you've got people who are killed, people who've lost limbs, people who have suffered mentally, people who have lost friends. So those people, you know, there is no moving on. But publicly, I think. And this isn't an our generation thing. This is going back as far. I mean, my own regiment. Look at Rogues drifting in Sandalwana. Fucking most of the regiment gets wiped out of Sandalwana. Don't hear about that much, but we all know about Rogues drift. You know, and the VCs there. So this is a thing as old as time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean the other on the other hand there. I mean, I do know people have been awarded certain awards, and to say that they got the award for this, but it isn't. They actually got the award for this, but you can't mention that. You know, it's like the thing. You know, that goes on as well. So when I found out about a few people, and they said, "Oh, you got that? Yeah. Oh, right, okay, yeah. You know, not stuff you can really talk about. Fucking out to see how it works now. I mean, what was it like coming back from then? You know, you've done your second tour now. Were you not like a bit fed up? You know, I need a break now.
I wasn't. Like, I've always said, I felt like I had blue balls. I think as well, it's like when you're sitting and watching BFBS news and you're seeing the lads in Afghanistan with A10s coming in and JDAMs dropping, you're like, How come we haven't got that? You know, meanwhile, we're on fucking Card Alpha. You know, so I there was that case of like, it was a bit like, you know, bit blue balls, you know, in a way. And I think a lot of us were like, fucking, I want to do an Afghan, you know. And then there was other lads again who were sick of it and got out the army. And so what I did, I came back. I went to work in a gym for a bit, and I thought, well, at this point, I haven't totally gone off the idea of doing a commission, but I can remember when I was there, I was very fortunate. When I was Sergeant Major, we had a fucking fantastic head shed on that tour from the CO down. I remember the Sergeant Major, he'd been a colour man like an instructor at Sandhurst. And I remember him coming to have a chat with me one night when I was on stag, and he was like, look, you know, fucking, we'd like you to go for a commission, join the battalion and everything. And this is a bit different because this is the second battalion. Like, the battalion I wanted to join was the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, which is what my granddad was in. So this was the kind of technically the sister battalion, but also the adversary battalion in a way, because it's almost like North Wales, South Wales in a sense. That's a bit of a generalization.
I get it now, yeah.
It's a bit of a generalization. And that was the kind of thing you asked me if I had shit for being from the TA. I got far more shit from being from North Wales than I did for being from the TA. But I was obviously extremely privileged to be asked to go and do that, because, you know, being a platoon commander is massive responsibility, massive honour. But I think there was a part of me that was a little bit fed up by that point, and I wasn't as keen. Definitely was not as keen as I had been in some senses. And I also just really enjoyed being with the blokes. And I saw what platoon commander job was, and I thought, I think it's more fun in the section, to be quite honest. So I got back, I went to the gym for a bit, and one of my mates, he was also in the TA, he'd gone out on Telic 4, he'd then gone into the police, and he was like, look, mate, fucking, it's good wage. I said, I fucking do loads of shagging, like, why don't you join the police? And I said, well, are they recruiting at the moment? And he said, well, because you're a Welsh speaker, you can probably get in as a minority. So, yeah. So there you go. Hey, mate, you can put me down. You can put me down as a minority now and pump up your ratings probably. But so I thought, fuck it, I'll stick the application in. So I put the application in, got through the first bit, and then I went to do the second part, which is like medical and fitness test. And we started the bleep test, and it basically went bleep, bleep, finish. And I was like, all right, okay, if that's what the test is. And then you had to do this like push and pull test. And there was a girl who couldn't do the amount of weight that was needed. And instead of being like, right, fail, off you go, they're like hugging her, like, don't worry, you can do this, you get another go. And I'm watching this, I'm thinking, I don't fucking want to work with her. And it was nothing to do with the fact that it was a woman. It was the fact that I don't want to work with someone who can't pass this test, which was a piece of piss, and has now broken down about it and needs. I was just thinking, because, you know, I've just been around a troop of chimpanzees for the past year, and I like that. I'm like, I thought, I don't think this is for me. So I pulled my application, but because I had a start date for the academy or whatever they call it. I'm not sure what the name is. But also my parents were quite happy about the idea of me going to the police, because they thought, right, he's got back from Iraq in one piece. Obviously not everyone does. And they thought, okay, good, he's going to get a stable job and everything. Maybe calm down a little bit. Because I will say as well, I did come back from Iraq a different person than what I went, particularly after that second tour. I was pretty aggy. And was, you know, not massive troublemaker, but I think my parents saw, well, if we were in public and stuff, I had a very short temper with people, which I've never been that person before. And anyway, I'd already decided that I wanted to do Afghanistan. So I told them that the intake had been cancelled, and I said, well, I need a job. I'll just, you know, maybe I'll just go and do some stuff with the army for a bit. And I banged my papers in, because the company that I was in Iraq with, they'd been stood up to go to Afghanistan. So I went back to the battalion on an FTRS contract, and went back to the company, and we went up to Afghanistan 2009.
I mean, very different then to Iraq. You know, I consider myself fortunate that I never went to Afghanistan. You know, for many reasons. That I've seen what the devastation it's done to people that have served there. You know, and again, it's not everybody who suffers, but the majority of the people I know who are suffering or have suffered, it is generally the Afghan series that did it, because they were far more kinetic. There was just more going on, you know. And again, some of the people found it a bit restrictive, you know, the rules of engagement, even though they were very different to, you know, Iraq or, you know, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, and stuff like that. It was almost full-on war. But it's a lot of people, frustration, I think, is the word, you know, and I suppose towards later on, the way it all ended, very frustrating, you know, very, very frustrating people, and understandably wise. And how did you find deploying back out there, or deploying there then?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say this, like in Iraq, you know, our battalion, including the 2 Black Watch lads who were attached to us, our battalion had lost 5 lads on the second tour in Iraq. And like, you know, the Rifles lost a bunch of guys. I know the Kingos had lost guys. And so I don't know if it was more kinetic, like for us, certainly, but it was different. I spoke to one of my mates the other day. We were talking about this because they were different tours, but he actually said that he found Iraq harder because in Iraq, you're going out on these ops at night in the Warriors, and then you might be getting hit by IEDs, you know, and this is where the Warriors were fucking great in Iraq. They saved a lot of lives, you know, for all the bashing that the kit gets, you know, snatches and stuff. The Warriors, they saved so many lives. Like, I had mates who were fucking smashed by multiple EFPs in a single night, and everyone came out okay. You know, bit of a headache. But the difficult part was you'd come back off that op, and then you'd go straight to the tank park to repair the bar armor, fucking maybe change a track, you know, and you're doing all this in the heat. And then you might get a chance for a bit of head down, and then it's orders for the next fucking op. Then it's getting ready for the next op. Then it's out on the next op. So I think the first few months, the first half of that tour in Iraq before the palace was shut down and we were out of the city, I think that tour was a fucking lick for people. In Afghan, you actually kind of got left alone quite a lot more because you might be in a checkpoint with just your platoon. And all our platoon commanders were great. And there was really not that much bullshit, and you kind of just left to yourself. You know, you got your patrols and things like that. But we did have the Warriors, but because we weren't going out in them all the time because it just kept getting blown up, we were doing a lot more foot patrolling. It was actually, in a way, the tempo was a lot more gentle. Now, that was our experience. You know, I have mates who were in the Welsh Guards around this time who were fucking doing company attack after company attack and stuff. So I can only speak from my own experience. But I mean, you know, I had a fucking rude awakening. Afghan as well. I kind of went in with my eyes open. Like, by this point, you know, I've had friends injured in Iraq. Battalions lost people. And like the day I flew to Afghan, I went to a mate's funeral in the morning who'd been killed with the Welsh Guards, and then I, you know, flew out in the afternoon. And then once you get to Bastion, you're doing your acclimatization and stuff. There was fucking merts coming in all the time with casualties. You're doing not repatriations, but what do they call it? Like the services that you'd have for people who have been killed in the previous couple of days, and there was a lot of them. So you know what's going on. Also, like the Black Watch lads, some of the Black Watch who'd backfilled our battalion in Afghan, they were kind of halfway through their tour, and we saw them there. They'd lost blokes, and we're chatting to them. And, you know, again, you could just see that they'd been through it. And like once when we got on the ground, we were in the Warriors. So we were an armoured infantry company. There's only one armoured infantry company out there. So we came out halfway through Herrick 10 because for whatever reason, the Warrior, the Armoured Infantry Company, was straddling two tours. So we did. We came out in July of 2009 during Panther's Claw, and then we went out to Musakala, and within the first couple of days, my vehicle had hit. Other vehicles had hit an ID. My vehicle hit an IED. The driver died of his wounds. We had some other casualties, and we were straight in the like I said, I didn't fire my weapon in Iraq in 2 tours, and with one of the first patrols that we did in Afghan, I put 600 rounds through the Jimpy. It was different that way, and I felt that we had, in some senses, more freedom, but in other senses, it felt like you still had the fucking handcuffs on. And I've spoken to an expert on this kind of stuff. His name's Frank Ledwidge. He's a really fascinating guy who's done a lot of research into why the British Army tours were conducted as they were. And a lot of it had become, it was about holding kind of areas on a map while minimizing casualties. And by trying to minimize casualties, you often end up increasing casualties. So, for instance, we were in Recce Platoon, and Recce Platoon, when you're doing your conventional training in the UK, it's right, you're going to go in a 3-man team and you're going to go off and find the Russians. But then you go in an Afghan and they're like, no, you're not allowed to go out in a 3-man team. We're like, well, we feel like we'd be safer going out in a 3-man team. No, you've got to have this minimum of blokes and stuff. And you're like, well, if we could do it against the fucking Russians, why is it not acceptable for us to do it against the fucking Taliban? Because where we were, there's not hundreds of fucking Taliban. But instead of just letting 3 blokes go out, lightly kitted out, and let them go off and do their thing, we've got to go out as a platoon. So they're fucking seeing you coming all the time. Most of the patrols are done in daylight. They're usually along the same kind of tracks and things. And just like, this isn't the best way to be doing things. Like you could feel the hands of control from London or wherever these decisions are made, that you could feel their control on Bastion and Bastion's control on the battle group and the battle's control on the guys at the front, rather than just going, right, you lads are at the front, you know what you're fucking doing, we're going to trust you to fucking go and do your job. It was everyone's fucking controlling everyone on all these stages back, and there's no trust in the lads on the ground to just go and do the fucking jobs. And it was very frustrating because it's like a lot of the time you know where the fucking Taliban are. It's like, and it did happen sometimes where, and this was why it was so frustrating, because occasionally when we do something a bit different, you'd fucking catch them with the pants down and fucking kill them. And you're like, great, let's do more of this. Nah. You're like, what? Why? We've had a successful fucking op there doing things differently. Maybe this has proved that we should be doing more of this. And then halfway through the tour, the first battle group we were with was the Fusiliers battle group. I think I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 Fusiliers, but they were fucking brilliant. Their head shed was brilliant. We lost another of our lads in September, and there was 12 of us at the time who had been detached. We were on a QRF up at Musakala, DC, and he came over to us with the RSM to break that news to us personally, which I thought was very good of him to do. And I could see in his eyes that he'd never met this lad. It was from a different regiment. And I could see in his eyes that it hurt him to have lost that bloke. And they put on, that battalion, they put on a service for him there. They had all their blokes. I thought that was very good of them. And they were quite good at just leaving us do what they did. And then the Household Cavalry came in and took over from them. Now, there's a lot of great blokes in the Household Cavalry. I've been on patrol with them. They're fucking good blokes. Their head shed were a fucking nightmare. And it was like being in camp in a lot of ways, except that any time you could be blown into pig nest. So you've got all the bullshit of the UK, plus you might go home in a fucking bag or without your legs. And it's just, that drove me insane. And like by that point, any keenness that I had like left in me had just gone, because I thought, don't get me wrong, I had some great times in Afghanistan, some of the best times of my life. Like living in a compound. This sounds a bit wrong, but living in a compound with a bunch of blokes, living in our basically living in our boxer shorts, was some of the best times I had in my life. No phones, no internet. You sat around a campfire in the evening, and then you go out and get in a scrap together. So I had some great times, and of course some very fucking sad times. But that part was fucking enjoyable, and then the back half of it was it just made me question. I was like, who the fuck's making these decisions? Like, what are we doing here? Like, we're not being let loose to do the job. We know that these fuckers are in the compounds down there. We're letting them dictate everything. I mean, it's just one of the basic like principles of warfare is that you have to keep the enemy off balance and stuff. And we were so, and I'm not saying predictable in the sense that we walk the same routes every day, but just rules like, okay, you're only allowed to use warriors on these roads because we don't want to annoy the locals by going through the crops and things. All right. Taliban are like, right, we literally know that you can only use these few places. We'll just IED you in.
Yeah.
So essentially, any kind of op then required removing these IEDs. And we'd go out and clear these checkpoints. So we're risking our lives on the cordon. The engineers and the aides who are risking their lives to clear the IEDs. And then you'd be like, okay, now we've cleared this. Are we going to set up a checkpoint or whatever on this to make sure that this doesn't get filled with IEDs again? Nope. We're going back to camp. We're not going to be able to keep eyes on it. The next morning, it's full of IEDs again. You're like, what the fuck are we doing? This makes like everyone's like by joining the army, by joining the engineers, the infantry, whatever. You've shown that you're willing to put your life on the line. But then it gets to the point where you're like, but why? At this point, like, why are we fucking doing it? The locals don't seem to give a fuck if we're actually here or not. Like some of them, I think did, but a lot of them were just kind of like, we don't give a fuck who's in charge. We just don't want to be living on the front line. Yeah. Which is perfectly understandable, and it was a real question of what we're doing here. And then, like you said, like a lot of people had said to me, oh, you must have been really upset when when Kabul happened and the pullout happened. It was like, man, I fucking knew in 2009 this was happening. Like, I've had over a decade to come to terms with this. This is not a shock,
I mean, I've spoke to guys who talked about if we were still, the possibility of us still being an Afghan now, and how different it would be, and I've spoken to some quite senior people about it, and they're of the opinion that if the Yanks hadn't turn the fucking light off and the gas off and run off in the middle of the night, that we could possibly have still been there, and it would be a very different place to what it is, because it was working. As much as we lost so many people, and it seems as if it was a waste of time now. At the time, things were changing. It might not have changed as quick as people want. I'll say little things. I've been massive things. The girls going to school and stuff like that. The houses that were getting built, the infrastructure, the engineering infrastructure, the electricity, the gas, and stuff like that. And that's all gone to shit now. But if we'd have been there still, maybe it would have been like it was in the 70s when the Shah was in charge and stuff like that. You don't know.
Maybe Kabul and the towns, but the fucking countryside's a different story.
That's a fucking, that's prehistoric.
And that's the thing. I always say to people, like, because I the Afghan army gets a bad rep because they, there's a few reasons, but, like towards the end. But I say to people, like, look, if you'd have taken air power away from British and American and Canadian and Danish soldiers, our fucking checkpoints and PBs would have been getting overrun all the time. Like the reason that we were able to do what and hang on with so few troops was because of that air power. Now, as soon as you took that off the Afghans, it was only going to end one way. And what always fucked me off about politicians, one thing amongst many, is that their thing of, oh, well, we thought Kabul would probably fall, but we didn't expect it to fall this soon. So it's like, so you basically wanted them to keep fighting and dying for something that you knew was going to happen anyway. It's fucking despicable, mate. I mean, look, while I'm on my rant about this, fucking Parliament was not even recalled off their summer holidays until Kabul had fallen. So you're telling all the British soldiers, all their families, and the world, oh yeah, this was worth doing, but it wasn't when things started to go bad, tits up. It wasn't worth us cancelling our summer holidays. I'm trying to think of a word that someone will get me in trouble. I could not have a lower opinion of our politicians. Put it that way. The way that it was handled. And whenever I see them speak, like recently you had Keir Starmer come out, and this isn't a Labour Tory thing. I think they're all cunts. Sorry if I'm not allowed to swear.
So what the fuck you want? I agree with you.
but when you had Starmer coming out after Trump's comments, you know, you've got Trump saying something fucking stupid about British soldiers not being on the front lines or Allied soldiers not being on the front lines. Stupid comment. And then Starmer coming out, and this is what offended me worse, was Starmer coming out like he gives a fuck about the troops at the same time of he was, you know, one of these fucking MPs who couldn't give a fuck. He's trying to, you know, he's been behind a lot of these witch hunts. And I'm just thinking that pisses me off a lot more than what the president of a different country says, you know. But yeah, mate, it's like I get what those higher up people are saying, but to be quite honest, you know, Alexander the Great didn't really pacify Afghanistan. I don't know if we could have done it. And
well, we had 2 shots at it. We failed both times. Yeah. So.
And if we were going to do it, like you know, even where we were, if we had had a brigade in our battle group area, if we had a brigade, you probably could have accomplished a lot. But the issue's always been that we treated Afghanistan and Iraq like we treated Northern Ireland. And there's reasons why that had to happen, right? But at the same time, it wasn't fucking Northern Ireland, you know. And you know, look at the Second World War. We didn't keep a number of our troops back in the UK, or the bulk of our troops, and rotate people through. We were right. This is where the fucking issues are. We're sending out, you know, the army, and we're going out until the job gets done. Now, would we have had the stomach to do that in Afghanistan and stuff? There's, you know, probably not. It's a different kind of war. But the fact of the matter is, we never used to go, right, we're going out 6 months. And the problem is with the 6 month thing as well, you'd have a new commander every 6 months. So by the end of that 6 months, whatever the policy had been for that 6 months might start to be working. And then the next bloke comes in and he wants to put his stamp on it. So you get, all of a sudden, you get a different way of doing things for 6 months. So the locals and stuff, they have no idea which way the wind's blowing, because it changes every 6 months. So there was this whole 6 month thing. And it's not like it spared blokes from going back out, because you go out, you come back, you have your leave, and you're pretty much just into pre-deployment training for the next one. So you're at least seeing your families and stuff as it is. So I don't know if longer deployments would have been a better idea, but I have to think that there was a way of us having more troops there than we did. And I think even like an extra few battalions at a time would have made a massive difference, because everything was always stretched to the limit. And, you know, it just meant that we were barely clinging on to what we had, rather than being able to, you know, because, you know, it would be like, okay, now on this 6 months, we're going to try and clear this little area of the map more. But all these other places had just gone stagnant. You know, it was only like one area that you were really able to kind of put any focus in at a time. And I just think maybe with more resources, things might have been different. But I also think, realistically speaking, the Taliban could have just gone over the borders to Pakistan and waited us out and come back when we're gone, because we weren't going to stay there forever, were we? So I don't know, mate. A lot of this is above my pay grade, to be honest. I just felt it was quite clear when we were there that where we were, I think people would have chosen us if they had the choice. But I also think that they probably fucking knew that this is going to blow over. The Brits are going to go home, and when they do, we need to deal with the Taliban. So, you know, probably best to just fucking keep ourselves to ourselves, not get behind anything, and just accepting the
Get on
fact
with your
that,
lives, yeah. Get on with their
yeah,
lives.
exactly, mate, because they probably knew that we were fucking off at some point. I mean, they'd seen us do it in other places, so why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, you've done this tour of Afghan. When you've got back from that, like you say, I mean, it sounds as though you were quite disenchanted towards the end of it, type of thing. Did you not feel as though you'd want to do another tour out there, or did it put you off joining up fully?
I wanted to do another tour. So what happened when I got back? Yeah, so my boss in platoon commander in Afghan, he was brilliant, and essentially we had 2 rifle platoons in the company, and then the 3rd platoon was mostly made up of recce. And so when he got back, I cross decked to recce, and the boss said, look, to our kind of group of NCOs and as the lads as much as possible, what course you want to do. I want to make sure you all get on the course that you want to do before I move on. So I said a PTI carder. So when I did the PTI carder, and then when I came back, I was one of the support company PTIs, but I was also in the garrison gym because, again, I got lucky. I had a really great OC at this time, and he said, "What are you wanting to do when you leave?" And I said, "Probably work in a gym." He was like, "All right, I'll get you in the garrison gym." So, which also meant that I got out of a Falklands tour, which was pretty awesome. So I went into the gym, and I absolutely loved it in there. Because you're doing phys for the company, phys for the battalion, but also for like the different garrison assets and stuff like that. We had a really good group of lads in there. It was just howling, laughing all day long. It was absolutely brilliant. So as my time on this FTRS contract is coming up to an end, there was a couple of things that nailed it for me. One of them was because I said that I wanted to stay with the battalion because I absolutely loved being in the gym there. But they said, well, if you stay, you've got to go to juniors, and then you're going to go to a rifle company again. I thought, I don't really want to. I didn't really want to go to a rifle company. I very much enjoyed being in recce. I enjoyed support company. I love being in the gym, but I thought I don't want to go back to being in a rifle platoon. So that I was already kind of on the fence about it, and then there was. I used to put in a lot. So as I'm in the gym now, I'm also doing my civic qualifications for the gym. So I was able to kind of, I was putting I wasn't just doing like bog standard programs for people. I was really putting a lot of effort into learning as much as I could about, sports science and all that kind of stuff. Or, well, it wasn't a sports science degree, but that kind of thing. I'm putting effort into these programs. And I went in to show one of these sergeant majors this program I'd made for him. I'd spent hours outside of, like work doing this. I've been putting in my free time on this and everything. And he's looking at his computer, and he asked me what something is. So I come around to look, and I put my hand on his desk, and he goes, "Get your fucking hand off my desk." I just thought, fucking done with this. But I'm calling him sir, I've slammed my tabs in when I've come into the office and stuff. But I thought, I'm a fucking grown man here, mate. I think I was like 27, 28 at the time. I thought, I've done a few tours. I'm 20, and I've put this time in to give you something that is above and beyond what you usually get off somebody. Treat me like a fucking bloke, not a fucking child. And at that point, I came out, and it was just perfect timing, because as I'm walking past the HQ building, RCMO sees me out the window, sticks his head out the window. "Hey, Jonah, you fucking signing back up or what?" I'm like, "No, thank you, sir. I think I'm all right." And that was it. It was just that final straw, mate, because it had been a lot of stuff building up to that. And the thing is, I remember having this, I say conversation, it was an argument with my mate Patsy once. Because his thing was, he's like, "You think you're better than the army?" I'm like, "I don't, mate, but I just like things to make sense." And like, to me, a fucking bloke shouting at me for putting a hand on the table, that don't make sense to me. Calling him sir and like slamming my tabs in and stuff. If you want to do that stuff, okay, fine. But, it was just something where I was like, I just want to be treated like man to man rather than adult to child.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I had a fantastic time. I absolutely love that battalion. And I've always said as well, you can't expect the army to change to you. Either you change to the army or leave. You know, like the army is what the army is, and I didn't expect the army to change to me, so I left. You know, and with very, you know, with very fond memories of it. Like I absolutely, like I said, I loved that battalion. Would I wish that some things were done differently? Of course I would. Do I think that I know better about some stuff? Yes, but am I probably wrong about those things? Probably also yes. So you know, I just decided I've done what I wanted to do. Now, at the time, there was no more tours on the horizon. If there had been, I probably would have made the decision to go again, because you know what it's like. There's no way, if I've done 2 tours with those lads, if they're going on a third, I'm going to want them to go and not go with them. So as it happened, they did end up going on another one, but by then I'd already kind of left and everything. I'd left the TA by that point as well, so it wasn't possible to kind of backdoor. Because I tried going back to the TA for a bit, and
it wouldn't have been true, would it? No.
Well, I went back to it, mate, and I went to see the officer, and he was like, "Well, what do you kind of want to get at the TA now?" And I said to him, "Well," because I realised at this point there's no garrison to be a PTI in, and there's no recce platoon. So I'm like, well, I said I've done my PTI course, which qualifies me to get made up to full screw. I'd like to get made up to full screw. I've been a Lance Jack for a few years now. I'd like to get made up to full screw, as the course qualifies me for. Ideally, because I'm building up my business as a civilian personal trainer, I'd like to be on like the recruit training team, so I could just do weekends until I've kind of built up my business to a point where I can afford to kind of go away for a couple of weeks at a time. Now, you can't do that. You've got to go and do TA Juniors, which is a 2-week course. I said, well, I can't take 2 weeks off. I've told you this, building up the company. And I've already done a course to qualify me. And, you know, no offense, but I think I probably learnt more in Afghan and Iraq than I will do on a fucking TA, basically doing section attacks for a few weeks. Like, I know how to do a section attack. And I just thought, again, it was one of those, you know. And the weird thing about how the TA works as well is, like, in a regular battalion, you've got your least experience at the bottom, and then the experience, as you go up through the ranks, gets higher. What had happened in TA battalions, and I know this through speaking to guys who have been in TA battalions all across the TA, so this isn't just my own experience. A lot of the lads who were going away on mobilisation as privates and Lance Jacks were doing private and Lance Jack jobs in a regular battalion. But if you were a TA sergeant, more often than not, you weren't going to go and be a platoon sergeant in a regular battalion. They were going to find a job for you in an ops room or something like that. So as a result, you had most of the experience of operations was across the bottom in a TA battalion. Right, and as you got up, there was less kind of, and it doesn't mean that people hadn't been on operations, but they hadn't been in like a platoon role. So it meant that in those platoons, it was a very weird thing, because you had the actual hierarchy, but then the experience hierarchy was different. Because like I knew lads who were private soldiers who'd done 3 or 4 tours. Meanwhile, the full screw and the platoon sergeant over those 4 years hasn't mobilised, hasn't done any tours, but he's done 3 2-week courses and he's now a sergeant. And it just doesn't work like that. Like the army, the regular army, the reason it works, you know, it works because you get more experience as you go along and you do longer courses and things. So, and again, it has to work like that. You know, you can't be sending people in the TA off to do a full juniors and things. A lot of guys that I've met from different regiments just said they had the same experience. Sorry, man, do my hair. I told you it was a PTI. So it didn't really kind of work out, and it was a shame because there's people in there who I'm still great friends to for this day and stuff. But again, you know, you can't expect an organisation to change to you. If it's not for you, you have to leave. You know, so I left at that point.
I mean, a question I've got for you there is, you know, obviously, I did full stint, good pension, you know, when I left, and you know, drawn a pension now. Is TA and reservists? I mean, it just changed the rules on that, and reservists can get a pension now. You won't achieve nothing of that, will you?
No, and I opted out. When you mobilise, you can pay into one as well, but I opted out. If it hasn't come across by now, I despise government, and the less government I have in my life, the better. So if it means I've always kind of been of the opinion that by the time I'm old enough to draw a pension, the government will have nicked all of it and there'll be nothing to take out. So
they're fucking doing quite well on it now. Yeah, I must
yeah.
admit.
So yeah, and I'm
By
kind
the
of
time we get there, it'll be 90. So not
right,
yeah.
exactly, mate. And so I've always been of that. But I say I've always been of that opinion. My opinions towards government, without going on too much of a tangent, started to change in Iraq, where I could see the reality of a situation and then hear them talking about a very different one. And that started to, and then nothing over the last 20 years has convinced me that they ever tell the truth. So yeah, I kind of avoided that one. But I love the TA. I think the TA is fantastic. And to be honest, if I was 17 again now, I joined the TA. I think it's fucking fantastic. Like the opportunities that you get to meet people, to challenge yourself, and to make friends, I think is brilliant. And I think there's probably a lot of people as well who it's perfect for, because some people don't want to leave their hometowns. They might have families, they've got other business interests that they want to pursue, and to be able to do that alongside the TA. I mean, people forget like how much of the army in the Second World War was made up of TA. It's like and like and I think it's fantastic. It's a fantastic avenue for a lot of people. It just wasn't right for me at that point, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me every few months who thinks about rejoining the TA, especially when I see they keep kicking the age up. And I think about it, but then, I think, so it's a bit like a girlfriend, isn't it? Sometimes you break up with someone, you got to remember there was a reason that you broke up, and you remember the good bits. You think, oh, sex was great, wasn't it? Maybe I should go back. But then you remember, actually, there was all that other stuff too, and it's just best to let sleeping dogs lie. But yeah, mate, every few months, especially when they started allowing the beards again, I thought, or not again, but they started allowing beards. I thought, oh, this could be the.
I still find it fucking weird. I went to a reunion a couple of years back, and it was like there was a lot of us, veterans, and they'd sent a tranche down of serving soldiers to chat with us and talk and stuff like that. And I was just like looking around. I was like, there's more serving soldiers with beards than he is veterans. And I was asking one of the guys about it last week when we was up at this do, and he goes, I didn't really want to grow a beard, but you know what it's like when you were in, and he was in, he was a young sprog when I was when I was in, and he was saying like, he goes, you get given the permission to do it, but all them years where you're not allowed to, he goes, fucking everyone just jumped at it,
Well, so I was just going to say on that as well, mate. The funny thing about uniform is like when you're in the army, you're always complaining about uniform, and then you get out now, and I go and meet my friends, veterans from different regiments, and we all look the same. We all dress the same. It's like, like there is very much like if you're at a train station or something, you could usually spot a veteran a fucking mile away.
I mean, veteran to veteran, you're like, you kind of look at you, give it a bit of a nod and that, yeah. I mean, that leads me on to, so you've left the TA, you're going to get on with your life and stuff like that. And the other thing I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast is that you're an author. Does that go back to your interest? Because I know you've wrote about, history about the Second World War and stuff like that, and different battles and such like. You've also wrote non-fiction books. Fiction books as well as non-fiction. The history side of it, does that stem again from your grandfather and great uncle and the stories that you I mean, like you said, didn't talk that much about it because the silent generation and that. Does that stem back to there, or is it just because you've always been interested in history?
Yeah, so interesting. Well, on the talking and stuff, once I was going to Iraq, my granddad actually started to talk to me. Once I joined the TA, he started to talk a little bit more. And then before I went to Iraq, he was speaking more again. And the last time I saw him, he was in hospital when I got back from Iraq the second time. I think, probably had the most honest conversations that we ever had. Or not honest conversation, but,
insightful.
I saw a part of him then who had been hidden from me in a sense that like, and the more I've researched his history, like, so he would give me tips and stuff about, like one of the things he always said is like, look, when you're coming back into camp, that is when you're at your most vulnerable. They know that, and that's when they'll hit you. And And then now I've been researching the last year or so into his unit history and his own individual aircraft history and his crew's history. It made sense to me because 5 of his crew were killed flying back after a mission, and I've been able to link up these things that he said to me with, and I thought, shit, that's how he learned that the hard way, and these kind of things. But yeah, I mean, obviously, he was always a hero to me, always will be. And like I said, I've always fascinated. I don't know where it comes from, mate, but it's always been in me, this interest in soldiers. No one put it there. Like, you know, my granddad, he didn't go to Remembrance Days and stuff. Now I know why. Like the fucking losses that in his squadron, he was in 57 Squadron in the RAF. Every mission, 7 blokes gone, 14 blokes gone, 21 blokes gone, every mission. You know, the average, they were lucky to survive the first 6 missions. And they had to do, I think it was 30, you know, so he never.
That's scary, isn't it?
Oh, mate, the numbers are staggering. But yeah, he never glorified war. So that was never put into me that way. It was just something that was in me. So always been fascinated with war and soldiers, and always read a lot about it, and always kind of wanted to do right. And I've been very lucky like that. You know, as people who don't know what they want to do in life, I've been really lucky to have 2 things I wanted to do and get to do them both. But and even when I was in Iraq, you know, when we were at the Cobb outside of Basra, you know, there was a DHL place there, so you could have stuff shipped to you. You could ship stuff back really easily. So I'd have a bunch of books sent in, send a bunch of books back. I mean, there was even times we were in Afghan. Sometimes we're in the back of a warrior. There's a contact going on. Maybe one of the other platoons is there, and we're kind of just off on the edge. And there's the odd round pinging over, and I'm just sat in the back of the warriors reading my book about sharps, fucking rifles or something. You know, like even then, I always had a book in the back of the warrior. But it was just a case of when to get to do it, because working in the gym on Civvy Street, you know, it's long hours because people want to come in first thing in the morning or after work, and then afterwards, you know, I kind of go on the piss and stuff. So I just wasn't getting anything done. But one day, it was on my birthday. I turned up for work, and the gym had a big padlock on it. Basically, the company hadn't told anyone that they'd gone under. So I needed a job, and a mate of mine was working on the ships doing the piracy security. So he got me a job pretty quick. And that was the first time I'd ever had really properly time to sit down and write, because, you know, you're at sea, you're doing 3 on 9 off. What else is there to do? So that was when I started putting pen to paper, which would have been about 2013. And at the time as well, you know, there was stuff I'd kept a journal in Afghanistan. And I wanted to write that up more fully. It was still pretty fresh in my mind because this is only a few years after. And also I realised I had a lot of stuff that I needed to get out of my head, because I was very angry. I was very angry about how Afghanistan had been handled. Like I said, I was pretty convinced it would all be in vain. And I'd seen some nasty things and lost friends, and I was finding a lot of stuff very difficult to reconcile, and writing can be very good for that.
Well, it is a therapy. So, I mean, as much as talking therapy is good, the writing therapy is pushed as well. I've discussed it with people when they've had issues, you know, and I've given them the exercise to do is where you write it down. You know, what's bothering you, or what are there, or write the story down, whether you want to keep it or not. Some people, it's an idea to scrabble up, burn it, throw it in the bin, because it gets rid of that angst type of thing. Writing's definitely a form of therapy.
Yeah, it is. And the great thing about being a writer is you can always turn a bad day into work, because, you know, a lot of the best books are written about the worst days of your life and that kind of thing. There's never a crisis. It's a bit like being a politician, I suppose. You never let a crisis go to waste when you're a writer.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you touched on there about the anti-piracy. I mean, how long did you do that for?
So I did it for a few years. I kind of came in on the back end of the golden age.
Yeah.
So it was so I did a couple of jobs, and then I got a team. So as a team leader, I was on $500 a day, and obviously you work it so that you're tax free. So it was good. It was good money. And then what happened was, so at first you've got a team, it was all Brits or let's just say kind of like Westerners to start with. So we had Irish lads and stuff as well. So it was a great group of lads, and you'd be on this good wage, and then in between jobs they put you up in hotels and you're getting on the piss. It was brilliant. And it was probably very good for my mental health as well, because again, you got this time, so you just sat on the bridge wings, some lads are smoking or just having a brew and talking, which is great for people. And this is maybe why I don't think I actually had much. I didn't conceive of the possibility that I had PTSD or anything at this point. And I think because we just spent so much time talking to other veterans. But then what happened was they started to change the teams so that it'd be you'd be a team leader, and then you'd have three. For us, it was Sri Lankan lads, and they're fucking great blokes. But there's a language barrier. There's only so much you could talk about. You couldn't have a proper conversation. And then the crew have got their own jobs to do, and then a lot of them are, Russian, Ukrainian, those kind of things. So you start to feel a lot more alone. And I could probably put up with that, but then the wages started to drop, and it got to a point where I was like, "What the fuck am I doing this for? I could be earning more doing a few hours of PT a day." So I rode it out for a few years. Really enjoyed it for the most part. Turns out that I fucking love being at sea. Really loved it. Getting a good routine out there, and like, when the fuck else am I going to end up in these places around Africa and Asia? I went all over the place. It was a really fucking great experience. And it gave me the time to start writing.
Yeah, did you get into any scrapes while you were doing that? I know a lot of lads who've done it who did fucking, they were like, nothing ever happened.
Well, the thing about pirates is that they're not terrorists, right? They ain't trying to die. They're trying to get a score. And we had a couple of approaches, which I think if I had to put my life on it, I'd say were pirates. Because it was just the way that they came at you and where they came from and the behavior. There's no other reason why they'd kind of do that. But they're not trying, like, there's plenty of unarmed ships on the sea. So our thing would be, you get up on the bridge wings, you make yourself extremely visible, and you wave your weapon in the air. And they turn around and go off, because they're not trying, like,
they're not stupid.
They're exactly, mate. They're not trying to die. And that was about it, mate. Never fired a weapon. Or anything like that. Now, at the time, you're like, you're fucking, this isn't long after Afghan, like Afghan, I've fucking had the jimpy, mate. So, there's a part of me that's like, I kind of quite want to fucking getting a scrap on the high seas as well. But now looking back on it, or not even, like, to be honest, mate, very, very soon after, I started thinking, God, I'd have hated to have shot a Somalian bloke who's, fucking like, living destitute, because the blokes on those boats aren't the one making any money, And I'm thinking, I'm really glad that it never came to that, because the Taliban, you can, it's not as black and white as this, but you can tell yourself, those are bad blokes. Whereas this pirates and stuff, I think, would I be doing any different if my family were starving and needing money, So I'm glad it never came to that. At the end of the day, I probably have more in common than the people who own the shipping company. But it's it was a good job, mate, and it gave me the chance to start writing. And by the time that I'd finished on the ships, I'd got an agent. I had my first book deal and stuff like that, so I was able to step straight into writing as a career from the ships. I did go back.
What was your first book?
So the first book that I wrote was Brothers in Arms, which was about Afghanistan, but that wasn't the first book that was published. So Brothers in Arms came about by me basically writing all these different things, different incidents and things that I remembered, and then they just kind of merged into a book. And I used that book as a sample. Like, I thought it was going to get published straight away, but what happened, like, these things, especially with military books, they kind of go in cycles. So it might be there's a few years where they'll be like, no one's really into Afghanistan books now. And I'd kind of missed that cycle. But some publishers looked at it and said, like, well, we don't want this book right now, but we do want you. So what else are you interested in writing? So I said, well, I've always been like fascinated with the Romans, and I quite like to do what I wanted to do. Like, there's a lot of historical fiction on Romans, but most of it is from the point of view of an officer or a general or like a politician. And I was like, I just want to write about a squad, because a section of Romans was an 8-man section. And I'm very much convinced that soldiers are soldiers are soldiers, no matter the age. Fucking get up to the same mischief, probably think the same ways. And like, yes, there is slight cultural differences and stuff, but soldiering is soldiering. And I'm like, having read, like, you can read stuff from the ancient Greeks and just, you can recognize it in there, Humans are humans, I suppose. So as long as humans are humans, soldiers are soldiers. So that was so then I got a deal for that. But while I'm doing that, my agent said to me, like, James Patterson's looking for some co-writers to do some books with him. You probably won't get it because you've not had anything published yet, but do you want me to put your name in the hat? So I said, absolutely. They came back saying, well, if you're interested, write us an outline on these ideas about how you do it. Anyway, so I ended up doing 3 books with James Patterson, and they were the first books that got published of mine. So I think it was a very weird experience, because when you're writing James Patterson, arguably the biggest writer in the world. So it was a bit mental, really, because everywhere I went in London, I was seeing posters for his book, on the underground. And it couldn't have worked out better, mate, because it's like I took my mum down to London, and she wasn't she's never known an author. I never knew an author. So it's one of those, like, the stories that you assume is that how the fuck do you make a career out of it, right? Because you don't know anyone who's done it. And we got to London and the train stopped. And as we waited to get off, the door opens and right in front of us is a poster of the book. And I thought, it's couldn't have gone any better. And it was a bit of I think for her, maybe a bit of okay, maybe this is like a real kind of thing. And I just kind of got work quite quickly, mate, because I think I can't remember the exact number, but I was told by publishers about how most authors don't make. I don't know if it's most authors, but a lot of authors don't make the deadlines, and that kind of thing. And I thought, just by being reliable, I was able to kind of get start to build up a fair bit of work. And obviously, there's not many people who have served in the army who are also writing full time. So, I was able to start getting books ghostwriting for people who had been in different regiments and that kind of thing. And because I do the fiction and the non-fiction, that opens up doubles the amount of work that I can get. So I was very lucky that I was able to like, essentially I've been doing it full time for 10 years. So I was able to get into it very quickly. I was very fortunate.
I mean, you mentioned there about you a lot of people don't get the working on time. Do you think that the military side or your military experience has helped with the discipline to keep it going and get there?
That's part of it. I think the other part is I don't want a real job. Like, I've tried them. I went for a job while I was, it's like one of those ones. I had like a break in uni, because the summers are really long at uni. And I went for like this, it was like a data inputter or something. I did like 3 minutes. I was looking at the window. I was like, I'm fucking going through that. I can't do this. And then I'd also done like a bit of like labouring work for a company. I thought, this is too much like hard work. Like, I don't want to do this. So I dipped my toe into a couple of things and just thought, I say for me, I like being it's a weird one, because it's like, I think maybe one of the things that the army taught me is that I like being my own boss. Now, when you're working for a publisher, are you actually your own boss? Because you're a freelancer with a deal with that company. So it's not like you are fully your own boss, but I know when I have to produce something by, but nobody's telling me how I have to do it by that. And I like that. I like that in the army when the boss said, I need this doing. And that's it. leads you to it. That's what I always liked. Quite happy being given a job, but then I like to decide how I'm going to do it. But one of the things that the army, I think, really helps with writing is the ability to be debriefed, which is an overlooked skill. Everything you do in the army, you're then pulled up and taught, this is what you did all right. Now here's all the stuff that you did shit. And, you know, a publisher is going to deliver you that news in a lot more of a gentle way than a fucking corporal from the Highlands of Scotland is going to do, you know? So there's that. I think that is very important, to be able to look at your work there and also to like self debrief. All right, what have I done well? What could be better? I mean, I used to do, when I first started, I'd write reports on every book that I did. What could I have done better? What do I think the publisher could have done better? How can we do this better next time? What was a choke point? You know, what can we avoid next time? And like, what can we exploit next time? And I think that skill, that has been very important, I think, for going from book to book. So I think that there's definitely things like, at first, I'm not going to lie, when I first got into writing, I really leaned into this idea that you could just write drunk, that you didn't really have to have a schedule and all that. I used to scoff at that stuff. I used to think like, oh, don't need a fucking schedule, I'm a writer. And maybe some people can work like that, but personally, I found that the best way for me to write and to do my best work is to be sober. And being sober means being sober the night before as well, you know what I mean? So I tend to shut myself away for long periods to get a lot done. And then, you know, I like my blowouts, but, you know, I like to come to the desk first thing in the morning, get started, kind of just go until I feel like, when I start to see the standard, the work slipping, that's time to go and do fizz, go and have a nap, come back to it in the evening. And one thing I've learned about being an author as well is you don't get to just be an author. Like all self-employed people, you have to be a fucking accountant. But then you also have to be, these days, you've got to be a publicist. You've got to be a marketer. You know, you've got to wear several different hats in order to be a self-employed author. Publishers will do publicity and stuff for you, but the majority of it they're not going to. And then the other part of it as well is networking. You know, you've got to be your own, like an agent will bring you work, but you've got to be responsible for going to find your own stuff as well. So, or sorry, I say you don't have to be, but if you want to make a living out of it, I suggest that you do it. You know, like,
I fully understand that. I mean, like with doing a podcast, it's like I've done what now? Probably recorded about 120 podcasts, and probably less than 10, maybe 15 of them are people who've approached me.
Yeah.
You know, I've had to chase everybody else. And like you say, that networking and self-publicising. I mean, I'm not comparing it to being an author, but it's not that far away from it. And when you do your own podcast, you know what it's like. You are wearing lots of hats. And when you've got a full-time job, it can be a bit much sometimes. I mean, I'd say over Christmas, I did my last one I recorded on the 5th of December, and I didn't record another one until beginning of January. I just needed a break from it, you know, because it can get a bit too much. Yeah, chasing people it's like, and finding people. That's the thing, finding interesting people. I mean, that gives me another question for yourself there. I mean, you write fiction and non-fiction books. Which do you prefer to do? And which is hardest?
Oh. All right, I'm going to have to slightly change the question, because it's, if you put a gun to my head and said you can only do one, I would choose non-fiction. The reason being, it's not an enjoyment thing, but if I look back on my life when, you know, I'm hopefully at a ripe old age, and I look at what I'm most proud of, it's probably going to be the books that were focused on remembrance. And so the Second World War books, the Afghanistan books and stuff, because those are stories that I'm going to be very proud to have played a part in leaving behind for other people. Now, I didn't create those stories existed, but I got to have a part in bringing them together and hopefully introducing them to new people. So I think that is something that I can always kind of look back and go, right, if I haven't got kids or anything, if I've left a mark, hopefully it's that someone in 100 years' time might pick up this book about Afghanistan that they found in a secondhand bookshop. Because, let's be real, mate. How many people are going to be thinking about our Afghanistan by the time it's another 100 years from now? But someone will do, the same way as I used to pick up books about the Napoleonic era. Fucking, I hate to think that we one day we're going to be someone's Napoleonic era, and that someone could pick. Someone could.
I feel that older. I think I am now.
Yeah. Someone could.
You're right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
But and they can pick that up, and they can learn about people, and know about what people did, what people sacrificed. So for that reason, I would go with non-fiction, because I think that is non-fiction. I mean, every book is bigger than the author, because it's about how that reader interacts with the book, right? So it's one of the things I think people have a misconception about. I think when you're an author, you're kind of working on your own, and it's a very kind of insular job, but it's not, because as an author, even in fiction, right? In fiction, everything that you write is going to be influenced by books that you've read in the past, people that you've interacted with in your life. So there's this whole kind of conglomeration of all your experiences with other people, with all the other things that you've read, all the styles that you've picked up, all into one book. So that is a massive kind of influx of a variety of different people's inputs there. But then the way that different reader interacts with the book, like, you know what it's like? If you read the book when you're 18 and read a book 20 years later, you will have a very different interaction with that book. Every book is a team effort, because how that reader approaches that book with their own life experiences, their own expectations, etc., will dictate what they take from that book. So in that sense, you get that from both. But the fact that the non-fiction stuff is focused around remembrance, I think that would be the one that I would choose. I really enjoy writing them both for different reasons. It's very, like, I mean, mate, like you've got a podcast. I don't need to sell you on this, but like hearing other people's experiences and stuff is fascinating. And then doing my non-fiction work, I get to do that and get paid for it. It's amazing. But then the fiction work is really interesting too, because you get to come up with your own stories and create your own characters and all that, which is a load of fun in itself. So I can't envisage a world where I don't do both. I also write screenplays, which is fun in its own sense, because it's a different set of rules for writing that. And then, it's different and it's similar. And then sometimes as well, I write songs for some of my friends who are music producers. And that is an amazing experience, because if I go to their shows and I see people, like, obviously, like, most of what I write about is the worst day of people's lives. So when I get to go and see people experiencing one of the best nights of their lives and having a small part of that, that is a different experience, but very important in its own way as well. So I couldn't really choose which one's more important. In terms of difficulty, they both come with their own sets of challenges. Non-fiction, with the non-fiction work, again, particularly around remembrance, I feel a lot more pressure from that. So it's not necessarily that the work is more difficult, but I can feel that, like, my levels of, like, I don't want to say stress, because you're not going to get your fucking legs blown off at the end of the day writing a book, right? But you feel the weight of the importance of that work, because if it's a book about Battle of Normandy, Battle of Germany, Afghanistan, Iraq, you have been trusted with somebody's story, and you don't want to fuck that up. I'm sure you feel the same way with the podcast. You've got someone's trusting you with a story, a lot of the time very intimate, personal experiences. So there's a weight that comes with that. I find it a lot easier to say no to a beer when I'm working on a book about remembrance, because I think this isn't if like I owe it to the people who are in that book to come to the table at my best, because they deserve the best. With fiction, it's a bit different because you're not talking about people's real life stories of life and death and what they've been through in life, but you are being trusted by the reader to honor the time commitment they're giving you. It's a fucking big time commitment to read a book. I'm finishing I'm self-publishing a book in a Roman series soon, and because it always used to piss me off as a writer that sometimes you get into a series. I mean, we've all read Game of Thrones, or well, we all know of Game of Thrones, and that writer then has taken you to a certain point and doesn't give you the conclusion, because you're like, fucking hell, I've invested 50 hours to get to Game of Thrones, more like 100 hours to get to this point. And, you know, I know why it is. Like, if you're a professional writer, there's only so many hours that you have for writing. And sometimes, you know, if your sales in a particular series haven't been doing as well, the publisher might not offer you what you need to sustain your family. So you might have to make a difficult decision to walk away from that series. So I understand that it has to happen sometimes. But for me personally, I don't have a family to sustain. I just got a cat and me. So I'm able to say, okay, well, people have invested their time in book 1 to 5. So even if I have to self-publish 6 and I won't make any money off it, I'll do it because people have given me their time for book 1 to 5, which were published. So I look at that book 6 as just being, you know, I've been compensated financially for my time in book 1 to 5. People deserve to have the conclusion to the story that they've been built up for. So there's that expectation of you need to repay people's, like, yeah, so someone's bought a book, but for me it's not that 10 quid or whatever that they paid for the book. It's the 10 hours that they gave you to write it. You know, fucking, I mean, 10 is a tenner, but 10 hours of your life is a big fucking commitment, and you need to honor that and do your best. Now, that doesn't mean that you should always write to give people what they want to hear, because I think when you do that, that's when your writing will go astray. You always have to write what is coming out of you, without overthinking it and stuff. And if someone reads that book and then they decide, oh, I preferred the earlier ones, fine. But you've held up your end of the bargaining by honoring their time. So, you know, because obviously if you've got, I don't know, 10 readers, fucking, you're never going to have 10 people agree on how they felt about the book. You know, it's one of the things I always love about Amazon reviews. You can have somebody who's like, best book I've ever read, and the next person will be like, worst book I've ever read. And the truth of the matter is, you're never as good as they say you are, you're never as bad as you say you are, usually somewhere kind of in the middle. But yeah, so so in terms of difficulty, it's I don't find. Okay, actually, I suppose I have answered my own question, or answered your question and my own, because I'm trying to think the answer here. And the answer would be, what I find difficult is writing something that you are not fully passionate about. Because I've been very lucky to have every project that I get, because there's a lot of people who want to be authors, there's a lot of people who want to be professional authors, not many people get to it. So I've been very lucky with every single project. But there have been things that I've worked on that I've taken the job. I've known I'm not really that passionate about this, but I need the money. It's a job, and they have been the most difficult books to read to write. Sorry, because you want to deliver because you're being paid to deliver, and also because you know that someone's going to give their time to read that book. So you have to try and bring your best. But it's harder to just, sometimes your best will just fucking come out of you. Just because, I mean, there's a whole different discussion to have about where ideas come from and creativity and stuff. But let's just say that sometimes it just flows out of you and people will love it. And other times you have to fucking drag it out. So I would say that the most difficult things to write are the ones where it's something that you're not really passionate about, and you're doing it because it's it's a job or you're doing someone a favor or something like that, rather than it being something that just has to come.
I mean, we're coming up to 2 hours now. Didn't expect it to be this long, to be honest.
Told you I could talk quick.
Yeah, you know, it's flown by again. So what's your plans for the future?
Get more cats, probably.
I've got cats. She's not getting a friend.
Yeah.
She's bad enough. She hates me.
So after doing like ghostwriting and things like that for a few years, and then getting the opportunity to do these World War II books, that really cemented to me like, right, you're doing the right job. This is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you're decent at doing. And if I could, like, put it this way, mate, as we both know, there's far more forgotten wars, forgotten battles, forgotten campaigns, forgotten soldiers than there is ones that are known. So I could spend every year the rest of my life writing about things that I want more people to know about and still never touch the tip of the iceberg. So I'm very lucky now that I know what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. I have also kind of realized that not everyone is going to pick up a non-fiction book about, say, British, so Voices of Victory was British Army campaign in Germany in 1945. Not everyone's going to pick up that book and want to read about it because they don't want to read big non-fiction books. But a lot of people do want to read fiction. And I've realized that I can tell stories that are remembrance related through fiction as well as non-fiction. So without trying to give too much away, essentially, I've realized that I can start using doing fiction stories and working in real life people and real life campaigns.
Kind of thing. Yeah,
very much like a Sharp, but to be honest, even more. Like I say, even more. I'm not. I shouldn't act like I know all of Sharp off the top of my head, but there are real characters worked into Sharp. But I tell you who I books. I mean, I love the Sharp books. I love all of Bernard Cornwell's work. He's one of my heroes in the literary world. George MacDonald Fraser, who wrote the Flashman books. I don't know if you've ever read those.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
So George MacDonald Fraser, he was a lance jack in Burma. And then he then did a commission, served in Palestine, I think it was. And he wrote these Flashman books, which are incredibly well researched. They're fucking funny. They're just brilliant books. And he also wrote a lot of screenplays. He worked on a lot of movies of, like, in the good old high testosterone days of movies and things. And what I found brilliant about his books is his main character is fictional, but there's so much in there where a lot of the other characters were not. And essentially, there's no reason in a fiction book why you can't just, like, yeah, you've got your main story and your fictional characters, but there's no reason why you can't take a lot of detours and see and be introduced to real people who really have nothing to do with the main storyline. So to use the Sharp reference, it's not your Duke of Wellington. It could just be, I don't know, somebody who, a camp wife. It could be the story of a real life camp wife who was in the army at the time. And they don't have to move the story along. You can just spend a bit of time with that person. You can find a reason to have a scene that isn't necessary for moving the story along. But I'm not sure I'm doing a good job of explaining this.
No,
it will make sense when the first book comes out.
Yeah,
but
it's how life works, as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
People coming in and out of each other's lives. And you get to learn about someone, and it's got nothing to do with what you're doing, type of thing. So yeah, I fully understand it. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe he's actually reading the books. I've not read a book in years. I got audio book me. I'm too lazy.
Yeah, I was going to say there'll be an audio book, mate. I've got to find the bloody publisher for it first. But I mean, and then the screenplay side of things as well. I'm doing that, but the main effort at the moment is I'm doing this an oral history about Basra in 2006, 2007. So like basically Telic 9 and Telic 10. And the reason I picked those two tours is I was on them, so it was an easier pitch to the publishers because they have to obviously pitch the marketing to be seen, etc., etc. But I'm looking to interview. I think we're up to about 70 people. I'd like to get up to about 100, and it wasn't it was one of those books like the World War II stuff. I'm absolutely fascinated by it, and I want to write about World War II, World War One. As probably like the bulk of my work for the next few years. But I had the opportunity to do this book, and I've always kind of believed that thing of if not me, then who? Now, there's not been there's been very little written about that period, I should say. As we said earlier, it never really got covered in the news and stuff much. And I think I've got the opportunity to do this book. I'm very lucky that I have the network to find the people to be interviewed for it. And I was there 20 years ago. I've forgotten probably more than I can remember about it. So have a lot of other people. I'm thinking there's the opportunity to get it done now. I have the network. I'll be getting paid to write the book, so I have the opportunity, and I have a publisher that says yes, because it could be in 2-3 years' time you take this book to publishers, they say no, but right now they're saying yes. So I'm like, okay, fuck it, now's the time to do this. So doing that will be the main effort over the next year. Interviewing
How
people.
close are you to finishing that?
The question should be how close I started it. So I'm at the phase I'm in at the moment now is I'm getting the people together, and then once you start finding out who you have from different regiments and things, you start to work out from there about, because with, say, doing the Germany campaign, you have fucking loads of textbooks. So, I think the bibliography at the back of the Germany book was I listed about 60 books that I'd used as references, and then there's others which I might have just taken a line or two out, which probably didn't end up getting referenced because I forgot about them. And then on top of that, I've got unit war diaries to work from and all this kind of stuff. So you could very clearly plot who was where, when, and doing everything like that. With something like Basra, where people are kind of going in and out every hour on ops, people don't tend to remember. Like it's going to be more of a challenge to try and put things chronologically.
Yeah, so
it's a case of like getting an idea of who we have involved, and then seeing like, look, we've got blank spot here because there's like, so right now I'm trying to find people who are involved with ATO, because I'm like, well, we can't do Iraq without fucking people who are involved in ATO. So there's different blank spots that you're trying to fill out, and you're just trying to piece together, okay, who have I got to cover these different parts of the tours, these different experiences? Okay, well, we really need some hospital staff because it's not right to not have them. So, and then at the same time, trying to pin people to different parts of that chronological storyline. And then obviously the interviews have to get done. So, probably looking at 2-3 hours for most of the interviews. So it's going to be about 300 hours worth of interviews to do. Then the transcribing, and then what will happen then is what usually happens with these things when you go through lots of interviews is you start to realize that these two different people that you might have interviewed or listened to their interviews 4 weeks apart, you think, God, that's very similar to that other person's story. And you start to realize that people are talking about the same things. There's a bit of detective work that goes on where you start piecing together people that might have been at the same thing. And then you can follow up with questions. Hey, look, I spoke to this lad who's in the tankies. He said he remembered this. Do you remember that? And then you can start kind of getting more out of people because you've learned more from other people. All these kind of bits start coming together. And then what I will do then is I will try and write the book in the words of the people who were there as much as possible. So the bulk of the work for this is the interviews, the transcription, and then piecing them together. And then what I'm trying to do then is any gaps that need filling or any context that needs giving, that is then placed around that. So that is what I will be doing over the next 7 months. That'll be like a full-time job for like the next 7 months or so. And then on top of that, I have some screen stuff that's going on, another couple of books that I'm working on and things like that. So I learned very quickly in this kind of writing game that you can't just have one project going on if you want to be full-time. You have to have several going on. I have my podcasts going on. Where I try and put out 2-3 episodes a month on that. So have the podcast going on. I mean, we got connected through Facebook. I'm trying, everything is kind of like, not everything, but most things I'm doing are trying to be remembrance related. So there's no point in me just disappearing into a fucking black hole for, the next 7 months, because in that 7 months, I could be putting stuff up on Facebook that people are related to. So I'm writing my posts for my Facebook, I'm writing my articles for my Substack and things like that. And I tell you what, mate, like, I take my hat off to anyone who has a job and a family. I don't know how people, balance the two, like, because I'm like, if I had kids, I'd definitely be an absentee father. I'll tell you that. But it's great. I love it. I'm
found your passion.
Oh, mate, 100%. I'm extremely happy. And you know what, mate? Like, it's brilliant because I've got an excuse to talk to veterans all the time. It's fucking great. So people are like, oh, lonely job being an author. It's like, well, it's not. I get to talk to veterans all the time. It's fantastic.
I mean, I try to get as many people, or as diverse of people I can on the podcast, and I'll ask people like my mates or whoever, or I'll have anyone. The common thing that is said, I ain't got a story, but you have. Everybody's got a story. It's just whether you find it interesting or not, but other people probably would. And when you're talking to people and they'll say something, and then I find that a lot of people, when they come on, I mean, you'll probably get it with your podcast when you're doing veterans interviews as well. Once people start talking, relax. And if I can make someone feel comfortable, that's even better. And then they start coming out with stuff, and they end up telling you stuff that they had no intentions of talking about. Whether it be funny, whether it be bad, or both. It's been an interesting journey for me, because I was like one of them type of people who I don't like people. You know what I mean? I'm quite happy on my own. Leave me alone. And for me to do this, or start doing this, was well out of character for me. I was that grumpy old bastard. I want to stay away from the type of thing. And for me to start doing this, it's changed me. I must say that. It really has. Or hopefully for the better. Well, Geraint, it's like I say, it's gone over 2 hours now. Time's getting on. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'd just like to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. You've given me some food for thought as well, actually, on other things. I'll put on, obviously, the link to your Amazon pages and stuff like that on the show notes when it comes out. What about your podcast? You want to give a quick plug for that?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, I mean, if you are into war stories, etc., then join us on the War Story podcast, our Veteran State of Mind network. I got a bit slack on it last year. To be honest, mate, I was thinking about packing it in because I just didn't feel I had time to do it justice. And then I just thought, stop complaining, get on with it. So the war, that's back up there. Like I said, get a few episodes, 2 or 3 episodes out a month as a minimum on there. And if we got anyone listening who was on Telic 9 or 10 who would like to be interviewed and contribute towards the book, then please drop us a line. But mate, thanks so much for your time, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate you reaching out. It's been a while since I've been a guest on something, so it's
makes a change.
No, it's been nice, mate, and I hope I don't bore people too much. And I promise I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. So,
no, hey, it's been fine. Honestly, I've enjoyed it. It's been really good. I hope that people who've been listening and watching have enjoyed it as well. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that would be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.